quiet rumblings of truth. Satsang with Sitar. Sitting on the couch discussing the nature of reality. With your host, Sitaram Das.
Namaste. Welcome to Satsang. I'm here with Dan Farella. Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So how is your practice?
Oh, boy, practice. My practice is definitely evolving and changing as I think the whole planet is shifting. Definitely a lot of experience of trying to go with the evolution of practice and what it means.
Mm-hmm. So it's growing, and somebody. So I know you've got kind of a deeply spiritual practice, and you also, do some work with the land and the earth and the plants and things like that.
Well, the way I've sort of brought it into being is, I guess I call it return to nature. So, in my own insight and inquiry into what is real yoga and how do we best apply our yoga sadhana into the world. Basically, it brought me to the earth and working with the plants and kind of breaking into the idea that, wow, if we want to talk about Ma, if we want to talk about Maha Shakti, if we want to talk about the goddess, she's everywhere. And kind of this feeling of Eden, it was a big awakening to me as I discovered about plants and all these medicines and herbs. She's basically just breaking down our door with these things we call weeds. And now I've realized they're all prasad, they're all true blessings. And they're very high potent foods and medicines. And then you have something, science is verifying them, such as the medicinal value of dandelions, which, are pretty profound.
Yeah, dandelions, they purify the liver, and they're very cooling. This is what I know about dandelions. And they have a lot of, vital energy. There's a lot of vital energy in weeds. Like you were saying, a lot of Shakti in weeds. They kind of can't be stopped.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. So you have industries who sell chemicals to spray them, and every year they come back. And so, it's commonly known in the foraging world that 1 cup of dandelions is equivalent to 8 cups of milk in calcium. So,
you get your calcium from dandelions too.
Yeah, well, the good question is, where do cows get their calcium?
Right. Now, people can digest them? Because I know we can't digest grass.
It's there's the cellulose is something that we have to learn how to digest slowly. So these ideas of getting fiber into the diet and all this needs to be a process that's grown, organically. It needs to be brought into our bodies in higher and higher doses where we're getting more and more fiber. So something like grass, all grass is the equivalent of wheatgrass in its medicinal and nutritional aspects. There's tons of vitamins and tons of minerals in every grass. It's just a matter of chewing the fiber and swallowing it. There's a certain degree that each person's body can handle with processing it, but we can teach ourselves to get a higher and higher fiber diet. And that's what kind of, what are they called? The fiber, these high fiber foods, the claims in cereals and all this commercial stuff. Those are what they're claiming, and it's basically no different than grass fiber.
Nice. And so over time, if you were going to go right from maybe a standard American diet right to something that was just full of cellulose, it would be hard at first.
Yeah, there'd definitely be some constipation issues or some diarrhea. But, slowly we can increase fiber, and that's what these products are doing, such as taking psyllium husk or the, generic alternatives would be to increase the fiber, the cellulose, plant cellulose in our diets.
And this is kind of nice to hear. I usually save dandelions for the spring, but I recently had some broken bones, and I've been trying to get lots of calcium in my diet. So I guess I should probably add. I should probably add some dandelion. What were you going to say?
I'm saying there's actually something called the second spring as well, which is the fall time, and a lot of the plants that sprout up in the spring will reappear in their most tender forms in kind of this time, the fall.
Like Indian summer.
Yeah, something like that. So you can go out and also harvest dandelions around now, and they're less bitter. You can harvest them pretty much all throughout the year. The question is just bitterness, but bitterness is the medicine. So when we don't want to get the bitter medicine, this becomes a grand metaphor of.
Yeah, let's talk about bitter medicine. Because so often it would seem like poison, and so it's like, how do we have something that seems initially disturbing, and learn to embrace it.
Yeah, well, the question is bitter medicine avoidable? And I think we can only put the cover over our eyes for so long before we understand that bitter medicine is something that we have to go through. It's part of our life. It cleanses us. It's a cleansing process to digest the bitter medicine. And, of course, in Ayurveda, you have the expression that, the vipak, which is the post-digestion. So certain things that have a bitter taste will have a sweet post-digestive action. So you have these kind of processes where you think metaphorically, when you digest the bitter, sometimes the results of that can be sweet.
Right, like in our life, like we learn sweet lessons from difficult things.
Yeah, and all levels, and also in the world of dandelions and what we eat, and our spiritual practice and our lives and our interactions with people and our interactions with food. It seems like the more I dive into this, the more I realize these are universal principles, and they apply on every level, and the only limitation is my ability to apply all those levels.
Nice. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So is there so when we eat the plants, like do you meditate with the plants? Do you sit out there with them? Like what is it like when I know you do herb walks and things like that. What are those like? That's like 5 questions, I know.
Well, the herb walks are basically just a way for me to help people engage nature in a safe way. And we have a lot of cultural conditioning, which to me becomes psychological and energetic conditioning about that you're not capable of doing this. You don't know what will kill you. You could poison yourself. You could get poison ivy. You'll kill yourself if you look at mushrooms. There's all these deep, deep scars in our psyche about the engagement with nature, and I partially feel like, partially some of that is somewhat on purpose, but without going into that side of things. So my plant walks are the attempt to help people re-engage with nature in a safe way. And a lot of it is, what if there's this? What if there's that? What if there's dog poop? What if there's pee on this? And then I say, you can take it home and go wash it with fluoride and chloride and spray it with chemicals, and then it will be clean. And so when we really understand the scope of our conditioning and manipulation, then we recognize that there's this empowerment in going out in your backyard and touching nature and harvesting it in a bowl and bringing it inside and being able to prepare it and cook it and heal from it. And it's all free, it's local, organic, sustainable, all these things we're paying such big money for at the health food stores. A lot of it's in our backyard. So that's really my intention, is to re-empower people to recognize that nature is literally crawling up our doorsteps trying to give these foods and medicines into our bodies. And, we're going, ew, weeds, get them away from me. So
right, and yet they're so full of life, trying to grow something that doesn't naturally grow. We were actually talking about this before. Some things want to grow there. There's a reason. There's a reason for that.
Nature, it seems that nature's process is that she doesn't really like barren earth, and she will always continue to grow foods and medicines within the barren earth. So if you have, ecological devastation, what pops up is lots of weeds and lots of bioremediating plants, which is a really interesting kind of concept where we're understanding that plants are having an ecological aspect to the ecosystem that we didn't once understand. So they're doing things chemically. They're all chemists. And they're doing things to the ecosystem which we were unable to track previously, but now we're starting to get into some of that. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Paul Stamets, right, does a lot of bioremediation with mushrooms.
Yeah, so that's another field called mycoremediation, and so he was actually part of this research where they actually were the top in Oregon, I think it was, or Washington, and they had 3 piles that had lots of oil in them, and his was using oyster mushroom mycelium to mycoremediate this oil. And so the idea is that they're able to break down these substances into inert substances, and his claim, and many other people claim, that you could eat the oyster mushrooms and you'd be totally fine. So,
That's good. That was actually my next question.
Yeah, I mean, so I forget what it is. I'm forgetting the science, but I'm pretty sure they're hydrocarbons. Yeah, that's what they are. So oil, something like oil, is a hydrocarbon. So it's synthesized from hydrogen and carbon. The mushrooms actually break them down into hydrogen and carbon, so it's actually safe. And they're just inert compounds that exist in the universe everywhere. So they are kind of the healers of the earth. If we think about mushrooms being the ones who break down all the dead matter, they're kind of like the composters of the world. They're the superheroes. They're the Captain Planet of the world, basically.
Right, yeah, it was. I listened to him speak, and he was talking about those 3 piles, and I think one of those piles is still poisonous. You can't go anywhere near it. But the ones with the mushrooms on them, yeah, are now safe and healthy soil once again.
Yeah, so I think we need to look at nature being the solution. She has the answers. We're just blocking our ears up. We're saying, no, I can't hear the answers. I wonder what I need to do. And yet, something is presenting itself, and we need to learn how to see that again. And so that's really where yoga, to unite this the source is yukti. So this idea of unite, that's what yoga really is. And what is it? Union of what? And it's union of nature. And so, the realization that I'm having is that, oh my God, I am nature. We are nature. Yes. We're not separate. We're not observers of nature. We're not outside of that process. And another thing that's great is to go out in nature and realize, like, oh, I have an effect on what happens here. So even if it's in the small scale in your backyard, if you pick too many dandelions or dig them all up, they're going to be gone. Probably not dandelions so much, but we have an effect. And so I think that is really a good yoga for this time. Is understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes some practitioners, it's good to hear, because I feel like some practitioners get so focused on the higher chakras, and everybody wants to transcend the planet, and they want to leave the planet, and they want to go live in some astral realm or some kind of divine light abode. And the idea of just being okay with where we are and kind of developing our lower chakras and their connection, our connection to the earth through the root, through the svati, right, is a really good way of being holistic in your body, and recognizing the importance of your vehicle, right? Both the planet, both the body and the earth as vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that the concepts of seva, what is true seva? What does it really mean to serve? And I know, to be frank, for myself, it's much easier for me to sit and meditate in my own space and feel my own bliss and be selfish. And it's really harder, for me it's a much harder sadhana to go out there and knock on my neighbor's door. And so I feel like if I'm going to challenge my own ego and my own self in this lifetime, what I need to do is break out of my comfort, break out of the things that are easy. So I find that we're gifted with this ability to really be in our higher chakras. That's almost natural for us. And what I feel like we need to do is not go upwards, because that's already taken care of. We need to bring this light down into this world And, when you get into the concepts such as bodhisattva and things, which are the people who keep reincarnating to kind of help lift up the planet. And one of my teachers, Swami Satyananda from California, he's saying how, there's no enlightenment without all of us. And that really kind of shocked me and blew me away. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go sit in a ball of infinite nothing light until everyone gets it, Yeah,
it's not going to work so well. And it is really so interesting that probably at least some of the people who are going to listen to this can probably relate that if we've kept being reincarnated and we've kept being reincarnated, that we've probably done a lot of spiritual practice already. That we've probably spent times in caves and in monasteries and focused very much inward. Mm-hmm. And so probably a lot of us have a gift like that, coming in, and it might even make the world more difficult, right? I know many folks who are very sensitive and can't, and don't always feel strong enough to be in the world and feel like they're picking up on kind of negativity and difficulty and things like that. But that is the challenge. That is the challenge of the now, is to be strong enough to kind of bring that energy down and into the world and to be shared.
Yeah, and that is our sadhana. I mean, that is our greatest gift to the world and ourselves. What else are we going to do? You can't hoard light. Light doesn't want to be hoarded. It wants to be shared. And that practice and that learning how to do that is, for me, the most difficult thing. And I have to transcend the ego, the desire to change people, the desire to force people to see how I want them to see. This causes a lot of other samsara. So it's like, what is true freedom? True freedom is freedom in the world, Freedom, there's a great quote that says, not freedom from the world, but freedom through the world. And I think that's what we really need. It's fine if you're in your cave, but eventually I think we're coming to a time where eventually some company, some drilling company is going to be next to your cave, and then what?
Right. And I think some of that is even fear-based, our avoidance of the world, right? It is difficult, and the multiplicity of manifestations. When things are manifesting, it's not always going to be pleasant. It's going to be bitter. It's going to be sour. It's going to be scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to show us what we need to see, right? I mean, that's our interaction with nature, is we're wearing our goggles, and what we interact with and what we see and the energies that we perceive around us are intimately connected with the beliefs that we have about what we will experience. And so we're constantly getting a mirror gut check,
Yeah.
So we have to ask, not like, why is this happening, but we have to ask, like, why am I engaging this? What paradigm in me is asking for this, and why?
Right. And I can't help but think of the agoris. The yogis who intentionally put themselves in fearful situations. Agora means like grotesque or fearful or horrible. And the agoris are those who seek to go beyond it.
Yeah. Well, definitely. And so what does it mean to be an agori of the world, of the normal? See, that's what I've realized for myself. I can't let my spiritual practice be a cop-out of trying to get away from the normal and the mundane, because that's the most sacred. And, we're coming to a point in history where we can no longer run away from the fact that the mundane is the most spiritual somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's like we were saying, it's easy. It's easy to see the divine in a picture of our guru or a holy statue or in an ashram.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And yet we're being called and we're being pulled to, how do we help support the planet and the foundation of all these other people? Because, what gets me down sometimes is the feeling that people are creating so much suffering in their lives, and just there seems to be no way out. So what am I going to do? Hide in my, little room? No, I need to get out there and figure out how we can come together as a community and make it digestible for everyone. And I think that's something that's really difficult for us, and at the same time the most essential, is how can we turn this thousands of years of knowledge into something that's digestible?
Right.
What can we do, and how can we put it in terms and words that can be digested and can be assimilated? There we are with the metaphors again. The bitter medicine. How can it be digested?
Right. So what have you been coming up with?
I mean, the closest I can get is like plants, So I know, for me, I feel like, okay, yoga, oh, I don't know about that stuff. Tai Chi, oh, I don't know about that stuff. Meditation, oh, I don't know about that stuff. There seems to be a collective resistance towards these terms in the everyday consciousness. And so what I'm looking at is like, oh my God, what if I don't call it those things, but I bring another medium, which to me has become nature. So I bring another medium, which is like, oh, you have plants in your backyard. You have weeds. Those things you're trying to kill? You are that. And bringing these concepts, these yogic concepts, in through the plant world. And basically that's my way of saying, hey, nature, I need your help. Like, I can't do this on my own, and I need your help. So that's the way it looks like. That's the way I'm on the fringes of sanity.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a really important part, is asking. And if you think about, meditation on the masters or meditation on the plants or the gurus or whatever, is that they just kind of sit there waiting until we ask. And that a big part of spiritual evolution is kind of the cultivation of humility and the realization of realizing we can't do it alone, and that we don't know everything, and that there are mysteries continuing to be revealed, or just play out in more mystery.
Yeah. And I guess that's where we are in a time where we need to find satsang, and we need to find satsang in a way that is becoming increasingly more universal. And even that in itself is really pushing our own inner boundaries. And I know for myself, it's like, oh, here's a community, but they're a little this, and here's another community, and that's a little this, and everything's to the left and to the right, and it's like, it's constantly stretching us to figure out how we can become a global community, and find the true acceptance and embrace. And these people eat this way, and those people eat that way, and these people are blue, and those people are red, and all these kind of, again, the dichotomy and the duality that keeps us bound and suffering is going to rear its ugly head until we figure out how to come together.
Right. And there's something my mom said to me once, and it really helped me out quite a bit with what you're talking about. And I don't want this to sound too harsh. She's a wonderful woman. But one day she looked at me and she said kind of sharply, you're no prize either.
Definitely.
And I was like, oh, right. It's like I'm also strange, and I also eat strangely, and I behave oddly, and I'm into weird things. It would make sense that the people that I'm going to feel closest to are going to be a little out there.
Yeah.
And so, it's becoming more and more comfortable to me to be around this kind of motley crew of, I don't know, universal healers, just kind of these nuts and freaks almost who have really good hearts and who are like deeply committed to making something happen.
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely. And then how much are we willing to sacrifice our nut look and nut idea so that we can actually infiltrate in a way where we're speaking the language that needs to be spoken. And that's a really difficult balance to work,
Right. One of the things that's been really interesting for me is I teach these meditation series. And granted, it's not, I don't know who's not coming. I only know who shows up. But sometimes atheists who are stressed out come, and they're scientific minded, they're atheistic, they are not interested in hearing about Mother Shakti at all. They're really skeptical of anything that is not really directly provable by science. And it's like, okay, this is fine. You can believe whatever you want, but let's do a practice. Mm-hmm. Like, let's figure out a way that you feel better in your body and in your mind and in your energy system, which, of course, is, again, almost too abstract.
Yeah.
And it's been a really fun practice being challenged, by these folks. Be like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, what do you mean by that? It's like, how do you know that's true? It's like, and it forces you, again, to sort of like come off some of your subtle high horses.
Right. And learn how to speak about these things where they're not challenging, and that's a really difficult thing to do because they're really amazing concepts, and you're getting, okay, what is Shakti? Like, you and I have taken a lot of time to understand and conceive of that, and to bring that into something, not Sanskrit or more culturally acceptable. That's a big task. It's a big job. It's not an easy thing. That's why they use the word Shakti. So.
Yeah, do you want to, what if we get your definition for the listeners at home? What if you just speak upon this topic? You have as much time as you need.
All right. So for Shakti, I would say something like the universal energetic force, that which is enlivening everything that exists. So it's kind of like the active principle. That's the way I see it. So the vibration, the fact that my heart is beating, the fact that my body is breathing, the fact that my brain is processing and firing synapses, and cells are moving, and I drink tea and the chemicals are going to the right places. That's quite an organizing principle, and a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, a lot of movement. So that would be one way.
Cool.
Or I can say that, you go outside and you stare in the sun, and, you feel that sunshine on your face, and your face starts to warm up. That would also be Shakti.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of very powerful and creative energy.
Yeah.
So speaking of Shakti, it's Navaratri will be over by the time this airs, but you wanted to talk about Navaratri a little.
Sure, yeah. Love to. It's a great time to be.
What's that?
I said it's a great time to be discussing that,
Right. So so it comes back to now we're honoring the goddess not as necessarily plants, but in their mythic forms.
And also, I mean, I was explaining to my guitar student, who's a little girl, that it's honoring of the feminine, and she's like, well, what's the feminine? And the feminine is our mothers, our grandmothers, our inner feminine, the Mother Earth, all these levels are the feminine. So that's what I like to see. And it's also amazing to consider that Navaratri falls on the seed sowing time and then the harvesting time. And I always thought that was really, kind of the archaic origins of some of the Navaratri festival is the time of planting seeds and the time of gathering and celebrating around that. So it's got a lot of nature worship in it, and that's one of the things I love about Eastern mysticism is they do have that nature worship, and it's embedded in everything.
Right. And the social aspect of people getting together. Of course, there's going to be celebrations when people get together. You have a long. I didn't know about the seed selling, but you have a long day of selling seeds.
Yeah.
And then you might as well take the time to worship and celebrate together.
Right, and that's very much where the goddess becomes real. Very real when we're in a position where the food, the seeds we put in the ground becomes the food that we live off of. And once upon a time there was no other choice. There was no, if your seeds didn't make it, there was no ShopRite, so amazing, the closeness, that rich closeness that existed. And so it's basically nine nights of celebrating the feminine energy of the universe in all levels that we can possibly conceive. And I like to use it as times for doing some cleansing or some fasting, So I'm doing like gluten-free, sugar-free, caffeine-free, three vices I definitely engage in. So I'm just like doing that for 9 days. It's a nice time to, set some intentions, set some new vows, and, be part of thousands and thousands of people who are raising a certain energy. And that's the great thing about it. It's like, why engage these kind of festival energies? And one of the reasons is because it's a planetary focus. Millions of people are potentially, doing prayers and doing these fasts and certain rituals at this very time. So it helps to contribute.
So you get to tap into some of that. You get to ride some of that energy and be a part of it.
Yeah, ride the waves. This stuff is we're bound to hit challenges, and we're bound to hit, low spots, and we're bound to hit stagnant parts. I mean, we're going through our own subconscious or unconscious, which is essentially the universe's unconscious, and there's a place where there's no line. So it's nice to get some help.
Right, and that's really one of the stories of Navaratri, is when Durga slayed the buffalo demon.
Yeah.
Right, and the buffalo demon represents that kind of sloth and that stuckness and that heaviness and that inability to make anything happen.
Yeah.
And her powerful energy frees us from that.
Yep. So it's actually, this is has three names: the Devi Mahatmyam, the Chandi Pat, or the Durga Saptashati. So this is some amazing text. It's 700 verses, and it's really interesting because it's kind of this gory story of like Ma kicking ass, like just destroying all these demons. And as we get deeper into it, again, this teacher Swami Satyananda wrote it as a metaphor, as our own sort of inner demons, and really blew my mind to see like, oh, this is not a story about someone else somewhere. This is about my own inner struggle. And so this Mahishasura is known as the great ego, So it's like, it's all of ours. So we come and we pray together to release us from some of that attachment and some of that struggle.
Mm-hmm. A commentary I read talked about a lot of those demons, I think, in that story come in pairs, and it represents sort of the struggle of opposites. And so there's like demons of praise and blame, right? When we look back on our lives and we think about, oh, I did good, or oh, I did bad, we either beat ourselves up or build ourselves up, and we distract ourselves from what's really, really true. And there's a couple of those in there that, what's that?
The donkey versus the elephant, the blue versus the red.
Right.
The forces of duality. Yeah, and it's a pretty profound story. And so how can we bring it to relevance to this time?
How can we? You tell me. It's your podcast. You tell me how we can do it.
Keep having more podcasts. Now, I think a great way of doing things is to get people together and talk, and that's one of the things I've learned by observing and being part of, say, Occupy, being part of the transition town movements, being part of people just coming together. And I think simple ceremony, gathering, food, these are the original ceremonies and rituals that have always existed in humanity, and they are very sacred. And it takes a careful craft to learn how to make sacred rituals that are non-denominational and that don't turn anyone away. And so really that's like the greatest thing I feel like we can do, and that's what I'm trying to do, is figure how to bring ritual and ceremony in a way where no one even realizes it's a ritual or ceremony, and yet it's fully embodied. And that's quite an art and quite a challenge.
This is excellent stuff. So you are trying to build a community, right, up in Jersey? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've had this vision for a really long time. I was in a band. We were going to do it. You know, we were super hopeful. We're in our young 20s, like, wow, we can do anything. And, you know, the band kind of went their separate ways. And so this place is sitting, and it feels so ripe, and it always has. It's a huge 13 acres. It's on a Christmas tree farm. There's a huge farm in the back that's all fenced in, and they're producing some minimal vegetables, like whoever owns it. It's got a huge parking lot. It's a certified farm stand, and it just really has always wanted to have a community be part of it. And lately, I've just been feeling like, man, I'm going to give this one more go, because I've been traveling a bunch, and so I was at Earth Haven in North Carolina. I was here and there, just trying to explore and feel what it means like to be part of a sustainable eco-village or something. So I'm really trying to put the word out now that it's time to do this, and I really would love to be part of a team who wants to do more sustainable eco-village type of practice. So if you'd like to be part of it, you can email dan@returntonature.us. And I'm really looking for people who want to share the workload. You know, there seems to be no end to people telling me what I should or shouldn't do, and what I need is like a team. We need a team.
Not just advisors.
Yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of advisors. The whole world is so full of advisors, which is wonderful, and yet I'm realizing my limitations as a person to be able to write grants and to be able to, you know, fundraise and to be able to, you know, do community outreach and to be able to do this and that and to pay my bills and to do my sadhana and to, you know, all of us can do part. And so it's really nice to consider that we can come together to make greater things happen, and I hope this occurs.
Yeah, I hope this occurs too. I got to come up and see that. How far away are you from Philly?
Probably about 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Yep. So it's a great spot, and you know, we've had elders there. We had sweat lodges there. We've had some really great people. We just had a Mayan elder come and do a talk there, which was really great.
Oh, so it's not just farmland. It's not just open space. There's buildings and whatnot.
No, there's actually on the 13 acres. There's 3 houses on the. You know, my friends have always had the one house. You know, it's subdivided into 3 places, and so we've had, you know, lots of events and concerts and all this and that. And so we've had elders. We had sweat lodges there for some time. Beautiful land, really potent, very powerful, potent land, and I would love to just kind of represent the sustainable community in the middle of, you know, New Jersey, of all places. And I think... Well,
the funny thing is New Jersey used to be farmland.
Yeah, the Garden State.
It used to be the Garden State before they started growing smokestacks.
Yeah, well, you know, it's, in all fairness, it still is, and we're still in the process of watching it get destroyed, you know. It's not it's not a static situation, so there's more smokestacks and less farmland, and yet there's still so much farmland, and of course a lot of it now, unfortunately, has gone to subsidized corn and soy. So for this ethanol ideal, or I don't even know why they're still growing it. But it's not even consumable. It's
well, don't they feed it? They feed it to cattle, right?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about cattle feeding, and at one point it was subsidized for ethanol, but I think that fell through, and they realized it wasn't, you know, financially viable. So we've got plenty of corn and plenty of soybeans, but they are genetically modified.
Right. So yeah, it's almost like. Any thoughts on, you just said, you know, economically viable or, you know, financially sound to grow stuff for ethanol. How do we make something like community gardens and cooperative farm living, how do we make that economically viable or attractive? Is there any way?
That's a good question, and you know, something like the transition movement is a great place to start. Because I think the first level is getting people together, and you know, I'm not really excited about doing that by myself, and yet I'm excited when there's a group of other people, you know, who are like, let's do this, And, one of them may be like, oh, I'll talk to the township. I've got this person's number. And so it's like strength in numbers is definitely the first step. And then it's just finding, vacant lots and either doing it anyway and not being attached to the results if someone says, hey, there can't be vegetables here, or finding lots and doing it officially and being involved in local politics and all that. And I think eventually we're going to have to use our, yogic skills to get involved in sort of local politics and changing things on the legitimate level, unfortunately, because inside of myself, that's the last thing I want to do, and yet that's the greatest thing I know that I need to do, So,
right.
Keep growing food and plant it, put seeds in places. There's also the guerrilla gardening movement, which is really cool. They do some fun things. Yet, it may divide more than win. And so I'm looking at how do we win people? How do we win local politicians? How do we get people seeing that these are good ideas? And it requires a mild level of obedience, I guess, which, I'm not one prone to that kind of behavior, yet I see the function in it. I see the necessity in it.
Right, rather than just kind of attacking people with gardens and seed balls.
Yeah, because
seed balls are kind of fun, though. It is a fun idea.
Oh, it's definitely fun, but we're dealing with a level of consciousness which, changing paradigms is a big responsibility, and I've found myself cleaning plenty of messes up when I've tried to force a paradigm shift on people. And I think it's really important to recognize that, wow, paradigm shifting is a really deep art, and we need to learn how to do it really skillfully. And so, seed bombs are awesome. And yet, if we're not winning people, then, the backlash could be that more chemicals get sprayed, when we put the seed bombs down. So it's like, oh, no, the very thing I didn't want to happen. So at some point...
I'm curious. You talked about paradigm shifting as an art, that needs to be done skillfully. Do you have a list of competencies that are required for skillful paradigm shifting?
Well, no, and the reason I'm saying that is because I'm continually screwing up, and I'm continually opening my mouth and then seeing the consequences of it. So I think
this would be a good article. I would like to see an article on the competencies required for skillful paradigm shift.
Yeah, I think, really it's an intuitive practice and, patience and smiling and right opportunities and gentleness and heart-filled space. The hardest thing for me personally is to be able to express these things and remain in my heart, because it's a very vulnerable thing. So even when I see like someone throw, some cigarette butts on the ground when they're in the car, my heart and soul pull me towards wanting to engage them. And yet part of me wants to protect myself from that. And I know that if I engage them with protection on, then it's probably going to make them throw a whole carton out the window. And, so how do we stay in our heart in that moment? That to me is my biggest yoga practice. Everything else becomes irrelevant to the fact that I know that I feel called to engage in that way, and yet I need to do it in a really calm and relaxed way. But I get pissed off and I get angry and I get frustrated when I see people throwing stuff all over the place and, all these partially important and partially trivial things. But I think the deepest thing to remember about it is it's not about the garbage, it's about the conditioning, and the conditioning goes to a deep psychological emptiness that, is bred into us.
It's kind of like a spiritual homelessness. It's like we don't know we live here.
Yeah, precisely. And so, the best I can do is like, oh man, these weeds in your backyard, these are food, man. Like, who told you otherwise? And that's kind of like I'm saying, that's what keeps me on the verge of sane, because without that, then it can be, don't you get it? Like, why are you polluting all this stuff and you're harming your own home?
You need to come over and show me what's edible in my backyard. I know there's stuff that is. I've had hippies come over and eat out of my backyard and be like, oh yeah, this thing is great. This thing is great. And then I forget. Yeah,
it takes a continued practice, and it takes a while. Just like any mantras or anything, you continue to chant them and you forget some of it and you come back to it. So the same is true for all the plants, I just see them as huge mantras, huge mantric fields. And then they each, when you know their name, they have their whole way of opening up and say, hey, do you know that I can do this? Do you know that I can do that? And so it's like that's where, to me, it's a sadhana of hearing the voice of these plants, hearing the voice of nature, and they do open up. And it's a profound kind of grounded way of getting some of that deeper perception where, like, you can't afford to be wrong or make stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because, like, your life is at hand. So you can't just be like, oh, yeah, this mushroom told me that I could eat it. Because, the one chance you're wrong, there's sometimes not second chances. So it's incredibly humbling. It's incredibly enriching to have that feedback so directly. Nature has such a profound feedback.
Right. Yeah, we keep learning this. It keeps coming back to engaging the feminine and being receptive. We're so used to, sometimes in a yoga practice, of forcing the body into a shape, or forcing the backyard to look a certain way, or forcing the plants to be where we want them to be, instead of kind of listening to, the gifts of our body or the intelligence of the body, the intelligence of our consciousness.
Yeah, and that brings me to ahimsa, and oftentimes, most situations is all about like, oh, don't cause harm to others, and yet there's a deeper level of ahimsa that starts within ourselves and, with our surroundings, and how can we be gentle to ourselves and our hearts, and especially as males in this culture, I think is a profound gift to be trying to open our hearts in a situation where, I have this kind of archetype in my head. It's called the Jersey jokester, and it's the guy who's poking at you and like, oh, I'm just kidding. And, like we're trying to open our hearts amidst that. And it's
oh, right. Oh, yeah, he's mean. And then it says he's kidding.
Yeah, like, let me kick you in the side of the leg and ha, 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 just joking, and it's like, okay. And, like, that's just sort of an archetype that is on this northeast coast of like, sarcastic, like, meanness, but meant like, I'm just busting your chops, friend. And, that's fun and games, and yet somehow we're, like, looking, a lot of us are looking to have a deeper connection, a deeper heart connection. And,
to grow, because what that sounds like, that sounds like grade school kind of stuff. It's
definitely.
just like a grade school playground roughhousing, in our 30s and 40s.
Yeah, definitely. We don't necessarily, it's kind of frustrating. There's no principles in the universe that says you must grow and evolve. It's amazing that it seems like, nature and the universe is saying, oh, you'll get it next time if you don't get it this time, or the next time, or the next time, or you can just live this way for, 1,000 lifetimes. And, it's really us, it's myself that is like, come on, grow.
Well, I think there actually is an imperative to grow. I think there is a spiritual evolutionary force.
Yeah.
It's just that it takes a really long view.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mind.
Things just take a long, long time.
Yeah, and hyper crawling is totally part of growing, even though it's really hard for other egos to see that as growth, So.
What was I just thinking? Oh, the importance. So sometimes, right, when you were talking about like being a male in our culture and trying to grow and be sensitive and be receptive. I think that there is sometimes, I'm sure you struggle with this, I struggle with this as kind of a sensitive, long-haired guy, of going too much in that direction almost, and losing kind of my purpose and my drive and some of that kind of warrior attitude and mentality of being willing to grind through some stuff, being willing to kind of do some hard things and put my shoulder to the wheel.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? On like being both sensitive and active?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the Shiva and the Shakti, or the yin and the yang. That's those two dual forces that, when working in harmony, become the greatest strength. And when we act with our hearts open, when we can break through with our hearts open, this creates the best results, right? So there's like that quote about, I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about the kind of idea that, like, we're all diamonds in the rough, and what we need is sandpaper to grind us, and this idea that we're being polished diamonds. And kind of the idea yesterday that I was talking with my friend is like, yeah, but too much pressure, even on a diamond, causes it to break. And then, my friend's like, yeah, but, diamonds are the hardest thing in the world. And it's like, yeah, exactly. And yet, too much pressure on a diamond, even, it can break. So we need this pressure, and we need this deep engagement, yet we need to know when to let off and to back off and to allow it to be as it is.
Right.
And,
right, because that's the thing, is that's the thing about being nature, right? Nature has kind of an inherent perfection to it.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we let our practices just kind of reveal that, as much as, like, I think we need the revealing of what is true as much as we need the sandpapering away of what's not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's essentially the masculine and the feminine energies balanced, right? Which is, it knows when to do, it knows when to not do. It knows when to speak, it knows when to not speak. And that essentially would be enlightenment, right?
I suppose so. There are no shortage of times that I wish I knew when to not speak.
Yeah, right? And that's kind of, we make messes. So another friend was saying how, I forget, some Swami was saying, like, yeah, it's great, keep making mistakes, just don't make the same mistakes over and over. And just kind of this idea that we're bound to make mistakes, and we're going to make mistakes, and that's fine as long as we don't keep making the same mistake over and over again. And
right. I love new problems. I love a problem I haven't seen before 100 times.
Oh, I wish I could agree with you. Right now I'm feeling pretty fried on new problems.
You've got a lot of new problems. Well, it's good. I mean, at least they're not the old ones.
Yeah. It supersedes them, right? You forget, when you have a new problem, you forget all about the old problem.
Right. Well, it kind of puts it in perspective. It's like, oh, that's just one of those old things. It's like no big deal.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Because then I don't have the energy to make that one worse.
Right. Our mind can only focus on so much hell at once, yeah.
There's one thing that Chogyam Trungpa says is that, I'm going to paraphrase it. He says, yeah, you're growing when you don't complicate your own confusion.
Yeah, definitely. It's
like,
one thing to, like, feel hell, and then it's another thing to create more hell because we feel hell.
Yeah, make matters worse.
Yeah. I'm angry, and now I don't want to be angry, and I'm angry at the fact that I'm angry. That's not going to help very much.
I'm going to let everybody know.
Yeah. So we're trying our best. What's important is that we try our best and be authentic when we can, and admit our mistakes and keep going, because all of us are essential in this world for the evolution that needs to take place here. And that's really where community seems to be number one importance, and us getting together and just having the ability and the forum to share these things and to relate to each other's struggles and gains seems to be the best thing we can do. And that's, I guess, that seems to be the essence of what satsang really is, So
I think we're getting close to the hour.
Cool.
I think that was a good one.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of closing thoughts?
I guess my closing thoughts are just to help inspire people to come together at these times and to support each other. And I feel there's so much energy going towards, like, oh, no, stay separated. Your little mini world is so important. And so I'm reminded, and I'm remembering how important it is to be around people and to be around community and to share because that's really, all this, the hype of 2012 seems to just be about if we're coming together in community, then that's the best thing we can possibly do. So figure out how to organize and gather people together and share whatever it is, whatever sort of ritual or ceremony feels good or comfortable, help and share it. This is the only thing that really makes sense to me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Cool. So I have a website. It's returntonature.us. And you're welcome to also email at dan@returntonature.us. Very simple. So that's always an option. And please be in touch. And I do plenty of plant walks and herbalism classes and guided meditative plant walks and things with more and more plants.
That's great. So I'm gonna turn off the recording and then maybe we'll just chat a little bit.
Great, man. Thanks.
All right. Namaste.
Namaste. Peace.